Well, look, let's introduce our two brilliant guests for this special edition of the Power Test. Delighted to welcome Nick Pearce, who leads the Institute for Policy Research at the University of Bath. And between 2008 and 2010, Nick was the head of the Number 10 Policy Unit. He was also a special advisor at the Home Office, Cabinet Office and Department of Education. And Nick has had much experience of putting together manifestos. Nick, welcome.
Thanks very much. Very nice to be here. Yeah.
And also welcome to this episode is Claire Ainsley. Claire is a director of the project on centre-left renewal at the Progressive Policy Institute. And Claire was previously Keir Starmer's executive policy director from 2020 to 2022 and one of our very first ever guests on the podcast. I'm sure that is the first thing on your CV, Claire.
It totally is. Thanks for having me back.
So can we start with Nick, because you were very involved in writing the 2010 manifesto for Labour. Give us a bit of an insight into the process of putting together these sort of enormous, complicated documents. Where do you start? How do you get from A to Z?
Well, actually, I have an unpublished manifesto somewhere on my hard drive from 2007, because we had to be ready in case Gordon chose to call an election, which of course famously he didn't. And we had to scrabble around very, very quickly to put together a manifesto, which in the end was never published. That was rather different to 2010 because obviously we knew then he was going the full term and we had quite a lot of time to run up to it. It is slightly different in government to opposition because in government you are resting in large part on policies that you've developed with the civil service that your ministers have worked on in their departments. Some of it is about projecting into the future, things which haven't been worked up in government. And the Tory manifesto had a lot of that, as we've seen. But for the most part, you are in a process of going around some big egos in the cabinet, getting them to agree to the structure and content of a manifesto. You don't share the pen because you don't want lots of different writing styles. You don't want the tone to be inconsistent. You want a consistent tone and theme throughout. And of course, you have to work with the Treasury on what can and can't be afforded and all the fiscal implications. So you do all that kind of stuff, which you have to do in opposition as well. And you do try to give it some lift and purpose. Labour manifestos in particular need to speak to people's ambitions for the country. And certainly in 2010, Ed Miliband was the campaign coordinator or the manifesto coordinator. And he wanted to tell a story about a different kind of post-crisis capitalism. And that was intended to infuse the document. So you try to get some big themes in there as well as the nitty-gritty of policy.
What was the biggest policy from 2007 that's never been told to anybody before that you really would love to have been in 2010, but there was no money by 2010?
Well, no, I mean, a lot of it was what had been announced when Gordon took over and what was in the Queen's speech that year and various other things. And of course, it was pre-financial crisis. So all of the things that then happened, of course, were not registered at all.
Nick, I remember that period very well because I had just started as a special advisor just before we went to Labour Party conference, just before all the speculation started. And I remember, I think I'd only been a special advisor for about 2 weeks and then suddenly was summoned into like our Friday SPADS meeting, which we called SPAD School. And I remember you very solemnly saying to us, and there was me and Polly Billington, we were completely new special advisors. And you were like, right, you all have to go back to your departments and come back with some manifesto ideas. And we were like, we've only been here for 2 weeks. How is this even possible?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is a slightly weird process, and you of course also with the document itself, you have to have high secrecy about it. You can't share it around, so you can only share chapters with individual cabinet ministers. You can't share the whole thing, only with the Treasury really and the Prime Minister or leader of the party and the leader's team. And of course, you must make sure it doesn't leak, which in Corbyn's case did in 2017. The Labour Party manifesto goes to a thing called the Clause 5 meeting, which Claire will know very well, and that's when it gets signed off by the NEC and the trade unions. and you have to make sure all those copies are photocopied and given back and don't go anywhere else. You have to, at that point, you've got this sort of process of getting from the Clause 5 meeting to the launch. And that's quite nerve-wracking because you don't want things that you haven't planned coming out. And so I can remember certainly the feeling of huge relief as the Labour head of policy in 2010 when we'd actually just got the thing launched and out. The thing was in public and you didn't need to worry anymore.